Hi, this is Peter Parker. I'm with Daniela Rosawi, and we helped her do a short sale of her home in Lincoln earlier this year, up in the Catavadera development. And Daniela, I just was curious, before you and I met, I'm sure you looked into information about short sales, and as far as what's out there for people to refer to, is it clear, is it understandable, was it helpful for you, what you were trying to get, informed about as far as how short sales work and how it would apply to you?
I did do a lot of research on my own because I was looking at different options, but a lot of times, of course, you get little mailers sent to you which don't look very trustworthy. So especially when companies were out of the area, Southern California, and they would promise and offer you all kinds of things, and when you speak to them, you don't really get the answer you're looking for. They wouldn't know the answer, or they would make promises which I know would not be realizable. So yeah, I did encounter some people who I would think were not very trustworthy.
Right. So once we started talking on the phone, we went back and forth a few times trying to get answers to your questions and make sure how things would work for you. And what was that experience like for you?
Yeah, you basically answered my questions, and I think even if I would dig deeper and ask more questions, you always were straightforward and gave me an answer and clarified certain things I maybe might have had misconceptions about.
And what was it about the answers I gave you that made you feel that you could trust me? I'm just curious.
I think just because you were straightforward and you answered the question, like I said, a lot of times when I would talk to people on the phone, I wouldn't really get the answer. I would either be referred to somebody else, or they would make some statements, like I said, which I knew were not correct. You were well informed. You would give me answers which I know were definitely true with regards to the law and deficiency judgment and things of that nature.
Right. So the information I gave you, when you checked it out, it was in fact correct?
Yeah, it was correct, and I mean, that's how you basically gained my trust, because I knew you wouldn't just make statements which couldn't be backed up.
As far as the other choices you had available to you besides doing a short sale, deed in lieu, foreclosure, just doing nothing, I mean, what other options did you consider?
I mean, we had a loan modification, which of course didn't work out. Foreclosure, I know, would make it difficult to buy something in the future. And I must say, short sale, of course, as we discussed when we were looking at it, gives you an option to basically get rid of the debt you have with regards to your mortgage. There isn't any deficiency somebody can go after you for, and you have a better chance of buying something in the future.
Right.
So that's the reason why we decided on the short sale. In addition, Chase offered, at that point when we were doing the research, an incentive to short sell our house rather than having them foreclose on it.
Right. As far as your loan modification experience, what was that like for you?
I mean, I did the loan modification by myself. We didn't have any outside assistance. I basically submitted the papers. The only bad experience I had with Chase on that was that you would always talk to somebody else. There wasn't one particular contact person. I think it's maybe something this lender did because they used to be VAMU first, and Chase took over VAMU's loan. Our loan had originated with VAMU rather than Chase. And there wasn't one person who would deal with it. So they would always ask for papers. I would send them out, then the papers got lost somewhere in the shovel, or they didn't have them. They would ask for the same papers again. And if I called them, I would be online for a long time. It just would take a long time. It was a little bit frustrating. We got it modified, but they didn't really do what I wanted them to do.
Yeah, so they modified the terms somewhat, but they didn't reduce your principal?
That's exactly what I was looking for, yeah.
Right.
Originally, when I had the modification application in, I was asking them whether there would be any chance to reduce the principal, which they didn't do or didn't know that they couldn't do. They came back with a modification which reduced the monthly payment somewhat, but it didn't really help us what we wanted to accomplish.
Right. What concerns did you have before you decided to do the short sale? What were you worried about?
Worried about in the sense of, if the bank forecloses the house, then of course it's a foreclosure on your credit record, and it kind of prevents you from purchasing any other property in the next 7 years.
Right. What about tax liabilities? Is that something you were concerned about?
With regards to the foreclosure, I guess they could have, but the taxes, to my knowledge, are connected to the real property. They couldn't really have come after me for that.
Right. And then what about owing Chase, WAMI/Chase money? Was that something you were worried about?
Not if they would have taken my house.
Right.
Honestly, in this point, I'm both looking at it from the standpoint it doesn't make sense to keep it. They weren't willing to reduce the principal. The mortgage payment was high for the value of the property. So I had either the option to apply for another modification, let them foreclose, short sale, or sue them. And that would have been more burdensome. So the short sale, after they offered me the incentive, was the easiest route to go.
Right. Some people we talk to are worried about owing taxes. Like I mentioned, tax liability. They say, well, how can I owe $1 million on a house and sell it for $450 and not owe taxes? Or they're worried, how can I owe $1 million and sell it for $450 and not owe my lender money? I mean, was that something you were concerned about, or did you work through that through the information?
It's a primary residence, so
right.
They wouldn't have been able to consider it income and charge me taxes on that.
Right.
Not under the federal and the California law.
Right. So I think you mentioned this before when you were talking to people on the phone and other people, I guess, that had mailed you information. Once you started to think about doing a short sale, what were sort of your priorities, or what were you looking for in finding the right person to help you with that?
Somebody who has experience, who has done it before, who is trustworthy, and preferably local rather than in Southern California.
So given those as your priorities and what you went through with my assistant Alex and me in the short sale, how would you describe that? How did things go once we started working together?
Things went well because you understood, first of all, that I wanted to stay involved in the process. I did certain things such as showing the house by myself. I saw the people coming in. You were very accommodating to what I had in mind we wanted to do when we decided to short sell the house. And you were there to prepare whatever needed to be prepared and trust the documents, revise them, whatever needed to be done.
And as far as answering questions that came up during the process or handling any concerns as they arose, I mean, how did we do as far as that goes for you?
Yeah, you did fine. I mean, whenever I had a question, I would call or email, and Alex or you would get back to me promptly and answer my questions.
Some people, when I meet them and I try to describe how short sales usually work for our clients, just think it's, and again, I know that doing a short sale is not a great experience, but in terms of being able to get rid of, $100, $200, $400,000 worth of negative equity and have it be a lot simpler than what most people go through in a loan modification attempt, which many people have done. A lot of times people tell me, no, that what you're describing can't be true. There's no way that it's going to be that simple, that easy. And there's no way I'm not going to have to pay somebody some money. I'm going to either have to pay you or my lender or the taxes or something. So again, as far as what happened with you, what did you end up paying? Anything at all?
No, we didn't end up paying anything. It was
right.
You had explained, and as I knew it would be, that there isn't any tax liability, that they can't come behind you for any outstanding property taxes or anything of that nature. There wasn't any commission I paid. There wasn't anything besides I actually got the incentive Chase had offered at that point to do the short sale.
And once we got to the settlement and you saw the settlement statement as far as, how all the money was going to get handled and all the paperwork, all that was fine?
Yeah, that was fine. I reviewed it. It was fine. It looked
and so now that that's behind you and we've gotten that much negative equity taken care of and you're not worried about foreclosure anymore, I mean, what's it like now compared to before when you were not really sure what way it was going to go?
Of course, it's a burden of your soul or your shoulder, probably more on my husband than on myself, because it's not something which primarily upsets me.
Right.
I knew what I had to do and that needed to be done. So, yeah, of course, it's a relief. It's not there anymore. It's one little mark you can make beside the thing which needed to be taken care of.
Yeah. And as far as I don't know if you've had friends, relatives, neighbors, other people you've heard about going through short sales. I mean, how would you say your experience was compared to some of what you've heard from other people?
You know, I didn't have anybody who actually did a short sale. I had friends and a family member who had a foreclosure because they actually I take it back. I had one friend who had a realtor in the area who was supposed to do a short sale, but then it ended up turning into a foreclosure because for whatever reason the paperwork didn't get done on time. So I'm not going to blame anybody for it, but she was basically telling me she was the whole time under the impression that the short sale would go through, but then it ended up being a foreclosure for her.
Yeah, it's too bad. And looking back from your loan modification experience, because I know a lot of people, I mean, their first choice obviously is to stay in their home if they can, and if they can make their mortgage affordable, and especially if they can get a principal reduction. I mean, that's most people's first choice. But given the time and the energy that you put into the loan modification process and the results you got, I mean, do you have anything you'd say to people that are considering that in terms of what to be careful of or what to pay attention to?
I mean, it's a long process. If somebody decides to do a loan modification, it's a very long process, and you have to be prepared to send duplicates of everything you send out because things will get lost. People will not. I mean, my experience is that the banks are not really ready to process and deal with loan modification in most cases. I have not heard anybody who said, hey, they did the modification in a very short time frame. It takes a long time. You have to be patient. You have to send things out. And I think for loan modification, you have to be very careful because you will get offers from companies who claim they can secure loan modification for you, and they are attempting to charge you, but by law they are not allowed to charge you.
And have you heard of people getting principal reductions? I don't know if you have any people in your circle of friends or family and so forth, but
none of the people I know. I've heard that very rare cases it might happen, but it has to be probably somebody being deathly ill, not being able to afford the mortgage, that the bank will look at it and say, hey, we give you a principal reduction. But I have not heard of any case.
Yeah.
In person.
Yeah. So have you heard of loan modifications being a real long-term solution for people generally?
No, most of the time I don't think they're a long-term solution unless the person is willing to say, hey, I accept that the principal of my loan is still 30-40% more than the current value of the house. I think if it just comes down, people want to reduce the monthly payment. It's not long-term either because usually there is a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year payment, optional payment plan set up, and your payment will increase again, and then you will be back to square one. But at that time, there might not be options available to do a short sale and not have any tax liability.
Yeah, that's one thing we've been concerned about is the Mortgage Debt Forgiveness Act is set to expire at the end of next year, and that's really been a big help for a lot of people and not having a tax liability, and it's really hard to say where that will go. So
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Down the line, maybe 2-3 years down the line, if people had a loan modification, payments will be high again. Probably the real estate value will not have improved or increased that much, so they might not have an option to do a short sale and not be liable for certain taxes.
Yeah, that's a concern of ours too. It looks like this is a real window that's been created where people are free from tax liability and, for that matter, mortgage liability in most cases. And I'm just concerned that if people miss this opportunity, it might not be as workable and attractive in the future. Yeah. I really appreciate all the time you spent. Is there anything else you'd just like to say as far as your experience working with me? Any suggestions? Anything at all?
I mean, you're very helpful, and like I said, I would refer you to any family or friends who do want to do a short sale. I don't have anything to say which would tell me, hey, don't do it. I would say, if you are in that situation, seek advice and consider working with Peter to get a short sale then.
Great. Thanks, Danielle. I really appreciate your time.
You're welcome.